This is Audible.
On behalf of the State Board of Education, I welcome you to these hearings. My name is Steve Abrams. I'm chair of the State Board of Education and also chair of this science subcommittee. My fellow board members on the subcommittee with me are Mrs. Connie Morris and Mrs. Kathy Martin. The purpose of the hearings that will be held today is to assist us as the State Board members in understanding the complex and oftentimes confusing issues regarding science education. A brief history of how we arrived at these hearings may be of value. In June of last year, a statewide committee appointed by the Commissioner of Education and comprised of 26 public and private educators spanning elementary, primary, secondary, post-secondary levels, retired educators, curriculum coordinators, and a private practice physician began the process of reviewing and revising the state science standards. The writing committee met several times between June and November and presented a draft of the standards to the State Board in December of 2004. At the same time, 8 members of the writing committee submitted what is now referred to as the minority report, asking the State Board to consider some changes to the draft. Through much discussion at the State Board, a subcommittee, the three of us, was formed to further examine the issues contained in the minority report. Also, after much discussion, it was decided the best forum to address the issues was via hearings such as these we will have today. In order to conduct the hearings in a reasonable time frame and in a civil manner, there are a few house rules and procedures that you, the audience, need to be aware of. I request that no comments come from the audience. These are hearings for us, the State Board Subcommittee, and the testimony you hear today deserves our courtesy. Mr. Irganagarai has requested a set amount of time for his presentation. Following his presentation, the legal counsel for the opposing viewpoint will be given half that amount of time to ask questions. Following that, we, the subcommittee members, will be given half of that amount of time to ask questions. For example, if Mr. Irganagarai takes 2 hours for his presentation, the opposing counsel will be given 1 hour for questions, and the subcommittee will be given 30 minutes for questioning. We will take one 15-minute break this afternoon, break for lunch, return 1 hour later with another 15-minute break this afternoon. Please note that Memorial Hall does not allow food or drink in the auditorium. We would greatly appreciate it if you abide by this policy. In addition, please turn off your cell phones. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the others on the stage. Mr. John Calvert, and on the other side is Mr. Pedro Irganagarai.
Dr.
Additionally,
Abrams, I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Mr. Ed Sisson, is a lawyer with Arnold & Porter, and an author of the Minority Report, Mr. Greg Lassie.
Also sitting at the other table is Mr. Jack Krebs. Additionally, a court reporter is recording all of the proceedings, and a transcript will be made available to the public at a later date. Therefore, to the speakers, please speak clearly and do not talk over the top of each other. Again, I thank you for your interest in Kansas education. Mr. Irganagarai.
Mr. Abrams, Ms. Morris, Ms. Martin, Mr. Calvert, Mr. Sisson, Mr. Lacey. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Pedro Irganagarai. I represent mainstream science as reflected in Draft 2, as submitted by the Kansas Science Writing Committee on March the 12th, 2005. Draft 2 is my client. I'd like to show you a brief introduction and outline of what I intend to do today. As I said, first, I represent Draft 2 of the Science Standard. I want to make it clear from the outset that I support mainstream science, the position of the Coalition for Science, and the boycott of these hearings by scientists. Draft 2 accurately represents science as neutral in respect to the nature of spiritual reality. The Minority Report, however, advances a narrow theological view of science that conflicts with mainstream Christianity and many other faiths. These hearings have been an unjustified waste of taxpayer money intended, first, to justify the board's support for inserting creationist claims into the science standards, and to provide a showcase for the national intelligent design movement. The Minority Report and witnesses have misrepresented many educational issues, including the role of standards and the Draft 2 position on teaching students the skills of scientific inquiry. Number 5, the Minority Report's position on allowing supernatural causes in science and their denial of common descent are not, I repeat, are not genuine scientific controversies. The intelligent design movement's anti-evolutionary claims have had virtually no impact on mainstream science. 6, the state of Kansas is being used by the National Intelligent Design Movement and their wedge strategy. 7, consequences of adopting the minority proposal include harming the scientific education of children, harming the reputation of Kansas, harming our ability to attract bioscience and related industries to Kansas, and risking spending thousands of dollars on potential court cases. 8, there are serious legal issues associated with the Minority Report. Number 1, Establishment Clause issues. The minority position advances a particular theological view and does not advance a secular purpose. 2, issues concerning the abuse of discretionary power by the board. And 3, issues concerning the requirement of the state to provide an adequate education for our children. Our position. As I stated earlier, my client is Draft 2 of the standards. Draft 2 represents the legitimate work of the writing committee, empowered and chosen by the State Board of Education. I have made an exhibit book, and in that exhibit book is Draft 2. I urge the members of the subcommittee to take the time to read it. I have joined the Coalition for Science in calling for the board to adopt Draft 2. Exhibit, please. This is an excerpt from the Draft 2, from the Coalition for Science position paper. The Science Standards Writing Committee, appointed last year by the Kansas State Board of Education, has developed a superb set of standards for teaching science at all levels in public schools. But instead of accepting these standards, the Board of Education has subverted the process. They're now planning on spending tens of thousands of dollars, taxpayers' dollars, to stage a series of hearings intended to showcase a theology known as intelligent design creationism as a substitute for science. We support the adoption of the standards written by the Science Standards Writing Committee. We reject the show trial hearings, whose purpose is to make it appear that intelligent design creationism and the well-established science of evolution are on equal footing. We urge all Kansans to join us in adopting the following positions. First, we request that the State Board of Education adopt the final draft of the standard offered later this spring by the Writing Committee without revisions. And I'd like to show you on the exhibit some of the organizations that have joined the coalition. The Kansas Academy of Science, Kansas Citizens for Science, Kansas Family United for Public Education, the Mainstream Coalition, the Kansas Association of Biology Teachers, the Kansas Association of Teachers of Science, and hundreds of individual signers. Mike Everhart, President, Harry McDonald, President, John Martellado, President, and Carolyn McKnight, Director. Second exhibit, please. This is an open letter to the Kansas Board of Education from 45 Kansas University professors, which I would like to put an excerpt into the record. The theory of evolution is the foundation upon which modern biological research has been built. An effort focused on casting doubt primarily on the theory of evolution will only serve to obscure high school students' understanding of biology. We also believe that holding hearings on the relative merits of intelligent design versus evolution will be similarly detrimental to the goals of the taxpayer-financed Kansas Life Science Initiative. Intelligent design has not been tested scientifically and cannot even be called an hypothesis, much less a theory, since it has no predictions that have been scientifically tested. In short, in our estimation, many of the current efforts to influence the Writing Committee's efforts will insert material that is not generally accepted by the scientific community and will cast doubt upon one of the most successful and useful theories in science. We believe these efforts will be detrimental to the understanding of science by Kansas high school students, with repercussions for all our citizens. We urge you to accept without alteration the science standards as submitted by the Writing Committee for the good of our students and our state. Signed, 45 faculty members of the departments of Molecular Biosciences and Ecology and Evolution Biology at the University of Kansas, the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology at the University of Kansas Medical Center, and the Department of Biological Science at Emporia State University. Please, let's return to the earlier opposition. Next, I would like to read into the record an open letter to the board from 19 Kansas State University professors. We view the proposed changes in Kansas science standards parenthesis, the minority report, which is likely to be adopted by the State Board of Education, close parenthesis, with dismay and disbelief. The proposed changes attempt to define science as religion and to open the door to include intelligent design as a part of the curriculum. Science is not a religion, and religion is not science. Science and religion are simply different, but not exclusive. Approaches to viewing and interpreting different aspects of the world. A person can be religious and be a scientist, but they cannot use religion to do science. An overwhelming amount of biologists agree that evolution is the best explanation for the diversity of life on Earth. The flawed view of science that is being promoted will haunt our children as they prepare to attend college, seek jobs in medicine, agriculture, and bioscience, and make decisions about their own children's health. Our state is prepared to invest millions of dollars to promote Kansas as a new epicenter of bioscience and biomedical research. How can we invite and attract bioscience corporations to our state and top scientists to our universities when we advocate an uneducated and unscientific approach to teaching the foundations of science and biotechnology? The proposed standards that are sympathetic to intelligent design are misguided, unscientific, will harm our children and our economy, and should not be adopted. Signed by 19 members of the Division of Biology, Kansas State University. I also support the boycott of these hearings by scientists worldwide. Would you please go to the exhibit? This is from the Kansas Citizens for Science resolution regarding the State Board science hearings. Whereas scientific merit is not established through public discourse and debate, but rather internally through a consensus of those with the specialized background necessary to make judgment. And whereas it would not be fair to science to be found wanting by a self-admitted, scientifically challenged jury with an anti-evolution bias, now therefore be it resolved that KCFS calls upon the Board of Education to dissolve the unneeded and ill-conceived Science Hearing Committee, or if that fails to occur, be it resolved that KCFS calls on the entire science and science education community of Kansas to refuse to participate in the hearing proceedings. Science has its own validity and has made its position on these matters perfectly clear and unambiguous. ID and other forms of creationism are not science. The specific proposals in the minority report have been rejected by the writing committee, and moreover, by the science community at large. The science community should not put itself in the position of participating in a rigged hearing where non-scientists will appear to sit in judgment and find science lacking. Science should not give the anti-evolution members of the board the veneer of respectability when they take their predictable action. Let the board take responsibility for its actions without dignifying those actions with the appearance of academic rigor. I'd like to show the exhibit from the American Association for the Advancement of Science, please. And this is from Alan Leshner, Chief Executive Officer. After much consideration, AAAS respectfully declines to participate in this hearing out of concern that rather than contribute to science education, it will most likely serve to confuse the public about the nature of the scientific enterprise. The consensus view of the scientific community on evolution is well established and presented clearly in the AAAS benchmarks for scientific literacy and in the National Academy National Science Education Standards. Although scientists may debate details of the mechanisms of evolution, there is no argument among scientists about whether evolution is taking place. We do not believe that any useful purpose be served by our presentation in this event. I'd like to talk for a bit about the nature of science and intelligent design theology. Draft 2 is neutral in respect to the nature of spiritual reality. Number 2, members of many faiths, including mainstream Christians, find no conflict between their theological beliefs and the fact that science seeks natural explanations of what we observe in the world around us, as stated in Draft 2. Number 3, the Minority Report claims science as an atheistic enterprise that implicitly endorses the philosophy of naturalism, the position that there is no spiritual reality. This is totally incorrect. Nowhere in Draft 2 does it state or imply that evolution is based on naturalism or that evolution is unguided or purposeless. 4, the Minority Report and the intelligent design movement in general denounce and reject the beliefs of those of faith who accept science and evolution. Number 5, the Minority Report, however, advances a narrow, sectarian theological view of science that conflicts with mainstream Christianity and many other faiths. Number 6, the actions of the State Board of Education in advancing the Minority Report by holding these hearings, raises serious legal questions about violations of the Establishment Clause of the United States Constitution and the Kansas Constitution. We will now review these issues one at a time. First, Draft 2 is neutral in respect to spiritual reality. Draft 2 accurately states that science is a human activity of systematically seeking natural explanations for what we observe in the world around us. Draft 2 does not explicitly or implicitly. Let me start over. I misspoke. Draft 2 does not state explicitly or implicitly that science is the only way of explaining the world, nor that the physical world, which science investigates, is all there is to reality. Number 3, Draft 2 does not, and I want to make sure this is well emphasized to you, the members of the subcommittee, it does not endorse philosophical naturalism or atheism. The words and concepts, naturalism, unguided, purposely, etc., do not appear in Draft 2. Number 4, Standard 7, Benchmark 1, Indicator 5, grades 8 through 12 of Draft 2 says, quote, the students understands there are many issues which involve morals, ethics, values, or spiritual beliefs that goes beyond what science can explain, but for which solid scientific literacy is useful. This sentence, written with the input of the minority, members of the committee, clearly says that science does not claim to offer a complete explanation of the world, and that Draft 2 recognizes the importance of moral, ethics, values, or spiritual beliefs. 5, however, minority witness Roger DeHart, when asked to comment on the fact that this statement clearly did not endorse naturalism, replied that the statement was bogus. Many people of faith, including many Christians, accept science as the limited enterprise of seeking natural explanations. 2, this does not conflict with their theistic beliefs because they believe that God acts in the physical world through natural causes. 3, they understand that science does not claim to answer all questions about the world, nor does it claim to offer a complete human explanation about any part of the world. Such people are often called theistic evolutionists in respect to evolution. Keith Miller, an evangelical Christian and a Kansas University geology professor, gave a talk last Wednesday on ending the warfare of science and faith. The exhibit, which is included in the group of exhibits that we have prepared for you, Ending the Warfare of Science and Faith. And I'd like to present a few sample slides. First, God is a God of process. God acts through processes in nature, as well as in human history. Divine creation does not imply any necessary breaks in the continuity of cause and effect processes. Evolution is simply a scientific description of God's creative activity. The nature of science. Science is a search for chains, of natural cause and effect processes. Science is not a statement about the nature of ultimate reality. It is not based on a metaphysical naturalism. Back, please. Recently, a group of clergy in Wisconsin wrote a letter to school officials about this issue. At this point, over 3,500 clergy have signed their letter endorsing their position. That too is an exhibit. It's called the Wisconsin Clergy Statement, which you will find in your exhibit package. Back, please. And I'd like to read to you the Wisconsin clergy letter. This is the concluding paragraph. We, the undersigned Christian clergy, from many different traditions, believe that the timeless truths of the Bible and the discoveries of modern science may comfortably coexist. We believe that the theory of evolution is a foundational scientific truth, one that has stood up to rigorous scrutiny and upon which much of human knowledge and achievement rest. To reject this truth, or to treat it as a theory among others, is to deliberately embrace scientific ignorance and transmit such ignorance to our children. We believe that among God's gifts are human minds capable of critical thought, and that the failure to fully employ this gift is a rejection of the will of our Creator. To argue that God's loving plan of salvation for humanity precludes the full employment of the God-given faculty of reason is to attempt to limit God, an act of hubris. We urge school board members to preserve the integrity of the science curriculum by affirming the teaching of the theory of evolution as a core component of human knowledge. We ask that science remain science and that religion remain religion. Two very different but complementary forms of truth. And this is one of the most bothersome aspects of the minority's contentions. The minority claims science is atheistic. Number one, the minority report and the minority witnesses make it clear that the core argument of the minority is a theological argument that science, by seeking natural explanations, is atheistic and materialistic, an expression of the philosophy of naturalism. Number two, the minority's tragedy is to claim that science is atheistic in order to then claim that their theistic beliefs, design, must be inserted into science. They want to change the definition of science to add supernatural causes. Here are some quotes from the minority report. And I quote, "The core of the controversy between proponents and opponents is that the opponents seek to narrow the scope of information to that which will not contradict the naturalistic claim that life is adequately explained by chance interactions of matter according to the laws of physics and chemistry. It is reasonable to expect that this viewpoint discrimination will necessarily have the effect of causing students to reach the decision that they and all other human beings are merely natural occurrences, accidents of nature, and that they lack intrinsic purpose. An indoctrination of naturalism would seem to offend constitutional principles. The minority proposals will put the state in a position of constitutional neutrality rather than of an advocate for naturalism, a philosophy key to non-theistic belief systems. The effect of this construct, seeking natural explanations, is to cause students to accept as true its unstated premise of philosophical naturalism. This can be reasonably expected to lead one to believe in the naturalistic philosophy that life and its diversity is the result of unguided, purposeless, natural process. Draft 2 of the standards does not state, imply, nor does it accept these conclusions. Science teachers throughout Kansas would be shocked and offended to hear that in their everyday teaching of science, they were indoctrinating students to believe that they were accidents of nature that lack intrinsic purpose. This is not only false, it is unfair to Kansas teachers, and most importantly, to our Kansas children. Back, please. The minority report, in claiming that science is atheistic, lumps the theistic evolutionist mentioned earlier. Oh, I beg your pardon, I jumped. Okay, here we go. I'm at 4. I beg your pardon. I jumped ahead. Number 4. Also, the minority proposed the following in the grades 8 through 12 benchmarks on evolution. Quote, biological evolution postulates an unpredictable and unguided natural process that has no discernible direction or goal. It also assumes that life arose from unguided natural processes. Notice that it is the minority that wishes to insert this theological description of evolution. Draft 2 understands that the question of divine guidance is beyond the scope of science. The Minority Report, in claiming that science is atheistic, as I said earlier, lumps the theistic evolutions mentioned earlier in the non-theistic religions and belief systems like secular humanism, atheism, agnosticism, and scientism. The intelligent design movement strongly rejects theistic evolution as a legitimate Christian perspective. Here are some quotes. And these are remarks on theistic evolution from leaders of the intelligent design movement. Philip Johnson, founder of the intelligent design movement, once said, liberal Christians, theistic evolutionists, are worse than atheists because they hide their naturalism behind a veneer of religion. That was said at the University of Kansas in April of 2000. William Dembski, the main theorist of intelligent design, writes, design theorists are no friends of theistic evolution. As far as design theorists are concerned, theistic evolution is an American evangelism's ill-conceived accommodation to Darwinism. What theistic evolution does is to take the Darwinian picture of the biological world and baptize it, identifying this picture with the way God created life. When boiled down to its scientific content, theistic evolution is no different than atheistic evolution, accepting it as it does, only purposeless, naturalistic, material processes for the origin and development of life. As from what every theologian should know about creation, evolution, and design, William A. Dembski, PhD, 1995. I also like to read a quote. And this is a quote from you, Mr. Chairman, given on April the 13th of the year 2000. Evolutionists, and it's not up on the board. I didn't get a chance to put it there. I was working late last night and found this, and I thought it was important that everybody hear it. Evolution, strike that please, Madam Court Reporter. Evolutionists start with the bias that everything must have a natural explanation, i.e., God does not, cannot be part of the answer. The bottom line is that evolutionists believe that different animal and plant types arose from previously non-existent animal and plant types. Creationists, on the other hand, start with the bias that God did indeed create all animal and plant types. They believe it is their responsibility to study and explain how he did it. The two worldviews are diametrically opposed and mutually exclusive. There's another group that tries to meld the two views together. They are the theistic evolutionists. They usually take the tact that God created something and then left it to evolution to work it out. If these people are talking about the God of the Bible, then they do not understand what is written in the Bible, or they do not understand the philosophy of evolutionary theory. And I have also attached that in my exhibits file. We now go to the part right there where it says here are some quotes. Okay. Also, last Saturday, when minority witness Angus, and I'm sorry to say I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Menuge for the record, Madam Court Reporter, a philosophy of professor at Concordia University in Wisconsin, was asked about scientists who have theistic belief and also accept evolution. This is what he said. The mere fact that you have somebody who holds two beliefs, A and B, does not show that they are logically consistent. He went on to say, it might be that some of these people are confused. And you will remember the significant number of people walking around here wearing a tag that said confused after that statement. As reported in numerous newspapers, this amused many in the audience. Conclusion about the nature of science and intelligent design theology. The minority is wrong that science, by seeking natural causes, is atheistic and materialistic. The minority denounces the position of Christians and others who believe that science and their faith do not conflict. The minority wants to insert their interpretation that science is atheistic into the standards in order to knock down the straw man definition that they themselves have created. The minority is using science and the state science standards as a vehicle to advance their narrow sectarian theology over other theologies, including mainstream Christianity. This is not, I want to repeat, this is not about science. It is about the minority's fight with naturalism, secular humanism, and atheism. They are misrepresenting science and abusing the state's public education system to wage a needless cultural and theological battle. Legal conclusions. Whereas the minority position is a theological view of God that rejects science as atheistic, and whereas the minority position also rejects commonly held theistic views, including those of many Christians, mainstream Christians, and therefore, by advancing the minority position through these hearings and other actions, the State Board is advancing a narrow, sectarian, theological view of science over many other faiths, and therefore, the Board, through its actions, raise real and serious legal questions about violations of the Establishment Clause of the United States Constitution and the Kansas Constitution, and abuses of Kansas statutory authority and discretionary power. Counsel for the minority has a formula. The formula is evolution equals atheism. Atheism equals religion, which equals state endorsement. Therefore, because the state is endorsing religion, we must be permitted to bring our theistic view into the school curriculum. That argument is legally wrong, logically inaccurate, misleading, and would not stand constitutional challenge, and here's why. First of all, counsel makes the broad statement that atheism is, under the Constitution, considered a form of religion. You are absolutely correct. But, and this is important, it is considered such in a limited scope. For example, if we think of religion as taking a position on divinity, then atheism is indeed a form of religion. In cases, for example, involving the scope of employment discrimination, an atheist is entitled to the same protection as a member of any organized religion. Clearly, certain protections are provided to individuals who assert that they're atheist, because freedom of religion is also the freedom from religion. Courts have stated that a general working definition of religion for free exercise purposes is any set of beliefs addressing matters of ultimate concerns occupying place parallel to that filled by God in traditional religious persons. Religion, therefore, does not have to be theistic in nature to benefit from constitutional protection. But what does that really mean as it relates to the issues here? It is important that we keep in mind that the right to a religious belief or opinion is very different from the way courts look at science and science education. The Constitution mandates that the government remain secular rather than to affiliate itself with religious beliefs or institutions, precisely in order to avoid discriminating among citizens on the basis of their religious faith. A secular state, it must be remembered, is not the same as an atheistic or anti-religion state. A secular state establishes neither atheism nor religion as its official creed. In County of Allegheny versus American Civil Liberties Union, Greater Pittsburgh Chapter, 492 U.S. 573, 610, 109 Supreme Court 3086, the court stated that a secular state established neither atheism nor religion as its official creed. To mean atheism means religion. Allegheny does not state religion includes antipathy to religion. The Seventh Circuit liberally interpreted the U.S. Supreme Court in Wallace versus Jaffrey, 472 U.S. 38. The court places atheism in the correct context, adjacent to religion. The court states, just as the right to speak and the right to refrain from speaking are complementary components of a broader concept of individual freedom of mind, so also the individual's freedom to choose his creed is the counterpart of his right to refrain from accepting the creed established by the majority. At one time it was thought that this right merely prescribed the preference of one Christian sect over another, but would not require equal respect for the conscience of the infidel, the atheist, or the adherent of a non-Christian faith, such as Islam or Judaism. But when the underlying principle has been examined in the crucible of litigation, the court has unambiguously concluded that the individual freedom of conscience, protected by the First Amendment, embraces the right to select any religious faith or none at all. The First Amendment is broad enough to encompass both believers and non-believers. As far as the prohibition of discrimination on the basis of religion. The instruction of evolution, does it advance or inhibit any religion? It is one thing for the courts to recognize that an individual may not be discriminated because she or he does not carry any particular religious ideology. It is quite another for a jump to be made from preventing discrimination to a finding that evolution equates to atheism, and it is therefore the advancement of religion in violation of the Lemon Test. In McLean versus Arkansas Board of Education, in which the defense argued that evolution was in effect a religion, and that by teaching it, school created an establishment problem that could be redressed only by giving balanced treatment to creation science, the court responded that if creation science was in fact science and not religion, it was difficult to see how teaching it could neutralize the religious nature of evolution.